Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this special Breckland Draft Local Plan Engagement event. I'm here this evening with Gemma Manthorpe, who is the Planning Policy Manager here at Breckland Council, and we've got Sam Chapman-Allen, the leader of Breckland Council, joining us online. That's why you'll see me and Gemma wearing these headsets. We don't have someone behind the scenes feeding us answers or anything. It's simply just so that we can actually hear Sam's responses and know when he's finished talking. My name's Nick. I work in the planning policy team here at Breckland, and I'll be asking these are your questions this evening. As a disclaimer, we've only vetted questions insofar as to ensure their content's appropriate for this type of event, and we absolutely won't be shying away from any difficult topics. It's a genuine opportunity for any of you to ask anything you like related to the local plan, the process, what's in it, and what it means for your communities. If we run out of time to answer any of your questions, we will make sure that we will provide an answer for them online in the next few days. We've had some questions submitted to us in advance, but you can ask further questions. At the top of your screen, there should be a Q&A button. You can type your questions in there, and they will be fed through to us to ask Sam and Gemma live. That being said, before we begin, I'd like to hand over to Sam for a bit of background on the local plan and what we hope to achieve.
Great, thanks, Nick, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for making time to join us, whether you're a resident, a business, someone who visits Breckland, or one of our town, parish, district, or county councillors. So, as many of you know, Breckland initially started the process for our updating what's called the local plan back in 2022. The local plan document is a mandated document every planning council across the country must have, which derives where we're going to be building or allocating sites for homes, employment, and etc. And we were just in that stage in the sort of back end of 2022 to issue what was called the Reg 18 consultation process, exactly the same stage we're in now. However, there's an update to the National Planning Policy Framework. That's the big document which government creates for how and planning and development should come about. And in turn, government changed their tact on where they were with the introduction of mandatory housing targets. Previous to that, it was for us as a local council to determine what our housing numbers were, and we thought we needed about 600 homes per year. However, the new government has come in and dictated that actually they would introduce a mandatory housing target, and that figure for us increased to a whopping 920 homes per year. So as such, that created some challenges for us, but we've tried to ensure that through the local plan process we've been as creative and innovative as possible to support that mandated and required growth from government. We've looked at things such as urban extensions, supporting our thriving market towns, making sure we're bringing in that investment, but also making sure that we're creating communities and homes where actually they're really thriving areas. And we've looked at new strategic development areas, so those SDAs, which I'm sure some of us will come on to. Now, I know that local plans isn't exactly a sexy topic, but for us as the council, it's probably one of the most important documents we will ever create as a local authority. Why? Because it really does set the agenda for how we want the district to grow over the next 10, 20 years and so on. And by the time the local plan's fully adopted, actually we've got a good understanding of where these homes are going to be and the types of homes we need and the type of employment sites and open spaces and other local policies which are important to all of us. So hopefully tonight, between myself and Gemma, we'll be able to answer any of the questions you've got, whether it's around some of the technical stuff, which Gemma will do, or whether it's around some of the wider challenges, issues, or concerns, or things we may have not spotted yet through this process. And just finally, just to give some clarity, whilst we're out to the consultation now at the Regulation 18, that does not mean this is a done deal. The Regulation 18 is such an important process to allow all of you, but more importantly, those key stakeholders, whether that's the county council, health, highways, etc., to consult and give out their responses around where we think things should be going or shouldn't be going. And we've then got the Regulation 19, which will come back out again on our sort of final assumption. So this is a really important time for you to feed in that local intelligence as to where we've got things right or where we've got things wrong, and if we have, why we have. But Nick, I'll stop there.
Perfect, thanks, Sam. We'll start with a question for you. Why should we respond to the local plan consultation? Why is it important? And are you actually going to listen to us?
Yeah, so building on sort of my closing remarks, just then the local plan and the Regulation 18 is such an important part. And we said earlier, we've tried to be innovative in how we've done this differently. So what I don't want to do is for anybody to think that me and fellow Breckland councillors and or you as officers have designed this local plan from our ivory tower. So just to give it a context, I can't go out and find bits of land to place employment sites or housing. We have to do that through the call for sites process and allow anybody and everybody to place their land forward. Now, that proves to be challenging in some regards because actually we can't do proper place-based activity. We can't say we want to build here. We have to allow those landowners to come forward. And therefore, through the call for sites process, actually, we've then got to sift those to work out what do we think is the best type of locations to achieve? What is a really big annual housing number of some 920 units? But here we are at the Regulation 18 process, and that's been shaped through all the hard work of our town and parish councils across the district. They did a really good piece of work with us in partnership back in the May, June time of this year, and feeding that local intelligence around some of our thoughts, but more importantly, some of those policies and what would work and what wouldn't work. And that's helped shape to where we are today in this formal part of the Regulation 18 process. But as I said, your feedback and your remarks will be valuable to make sure we're tweaking that as we move forward to the Regulation 18. And actually, I would rather we had hundreds, if not thousands of responses for us to wade through rather than just a few. So please don't think that this is a done deal. It absolutely isn't. We need all of you, as I said, whether you're residents, businesses, and visitors to Breckland or etc., to feed in those comments, not just around where we're placing some of those homes and those employment sites, but all the other really important policies in there, whether that's around intensive farming, whether that's around local homes, whether that's around some of the design, open spaces, allotments, whatever it is. There are so many different policies which are local to us at Breckland. We need your thoughts and feelings on to make sure we're getting it right, because ultimately it's all of our plan, not Breckland's.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. A couple of questions that have come through live already. When are we going to know what the plans are going to look like and what's being built? And a similar one's come in specifically relating to the SDA at Rowdham and Larling. Say, when will we know what's being built and where are the detailed plans?
So I think we're in a sort of a good stage to have an understanding of where we think the initial growth is going to be, and that's through the Regulation 18. So we've got the call for sites, we've got the maps of where we've got all these areas across the district, whether that's villages, towns, or possible SDAs such as Larling. But they will be tweaked and nuanced through this process. So some may find that actually that's just not achievable to deliver the homes in that location or the number of homes. So that's why the Regulation 18 is so important to make sure we're getting it right. So this is very much still in the draft form of our assumptions, and that's why the consultation process will help shape that. When we get to the Reg 19, we're pretty much confident and certain where we're going to be making that final submission to the planning inspector. Not us, someone independent to us will verify where we think we can deliver homes. Now, I say where we think we can deliver homes. Part of that inspection process from that independent inspector is to actually make sure those homes can be delivered over the life of the local plan, but more importantly, meeting that government's new mandated 920 homes per year.
Thanks for that.
If I can just, sorry, Nick, may I just,
you can.
I'm going to do the boring bit and expand on the timescale, which is we're looking at going to the Reg 18 currently. We are out to consultation until the 15th of December. Exactly as Sam says, we are then looking at everything, and then we are looking at the Reg 19 in July of next year, so that's July 2026, and submitting in December 2026. So when you'll know what is actually happening and what's actually coming through, exactly as Sam said, will be around the Reg 19, and that's around July 2026. But that will go through the independent inspector who will look at it. If you're looking at more detail with what is actually going to be built, such as house types and design, this will come through a detailed application, which is probably several years away, because that will more than likely come in post adoption of the local plan if the sites get allocated in the way that we're putting them forward at the Regulation 19 after it's been gone through the inspector, the main modifications, and been adopted by council. So we're quite some way off of knowing what's going to be physically put on site with regard to the specifics of the wheres and the types and the design.
Well, thank you for that, Gemma. Got one specifically for you. What's the rationale behind settlement boundaries being removed, and why has that changed?
So most people will be very used to seeing settlement boundaries, which are the red lines around your parishes and your villages, and that's built up around the built form. So they are red lines around the built form. We have decided at this time to remove them, and that is out to consultation. We'd like to hear your views on the removal of settlement boundaries. And the rationale behind that is to allow for a more organic growth of villages without having to be constrained to the arbitrary red line. It also reduces the need for development to be focused within the red line, and that can cause backland development, which is backland development's a very planning term, apologies. That means building, in essence, in gardens, so literally the backland. So by removing settlement boundaries, we allow for growth to be more in tune with the village and to protect the character of the village.
Thank you for that. Next question is, will the current reorganisation of local authorities have any effect on local use?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm struggling to hear you just a little bit, but I think that was in relation to local government reorganisation and how that impact where we are the local plan. So we are absolutely moving at pace on our timetable, as Gemma alluded to. Twofold. One, this government is making further changes to how we do planning, and we're expecting that as an update, and that will change how local plans are delivered. But more importantly, we want to make sure that when Breckland ceases to exist in May 2028, we have an adopted local plan which is sound and given really strong local focus, which all of you have helped shape. And whether local government organisation causes us to have 3 councils in Norfolk, 2 councils in Norfolk, or even 1 council in Norfolk, Breckland District Council will have left a legacy with all of you as our community, with a sound local plan in which, I think from speaking to colleagues in Norfolk, we have really tried this bottom-up approach where all of you have had the chance to shape what this should look like. And as Gemma said, right down to all of those policies are so important. So regardless of LGR and what that looks like over these coming months, we'll know by hopefully the sort of beginning of April, end of March, what the future of that looks like. But regardless of that, we've got a timetable we're sticking to, very little wiggle room for us, but that will ensure that when Breckland ceases to exist, Breckland has a local plan, and that will continue as it would do anyway until its time of update. So it will have absolute guaranteed weight through all of our planning decisions, whether that's through delegation or committee basis, right up until that's at the point of when it needs to start being reviewed, just as we've had to do with our current local plan.
Thanks for that. I think that's a question a lot of people wanted to know the answer to. I think I've seen that one quite a lot online as to kind of what's the point of this when you're not going to exist. But I think that gives a really good answer to that, and for those people that are asking that question. So thank you. Here's one that's come in. Why are sites still put forward when parish councils have objected to them?
Yes, a really fair challenge. And actually, I think it's fair to say that development is always difficult and contentious when it's in our communities. And I fully comprehend and appreciate that. And actually, I understand that some communities were immensely frustrated that, cast our minds back to 2022, they saw no sites within their community. Fast forward where we are today, they've seen sites come forward in their community. Now that's twofold. One, we've seen that large increase from that housing number. When Breckland was designing its own housing number, we were sat at around 600 homes a year we had to build. As I said, the landscape's changed and the government has now mandated that new figure every single year of 920 homes. That meant we had to go back out to the call for sites process, and that saw further sites come forward. Now, some of those sites we previously discounted were for numerous reasons, whether that's around some concerns around its locality, where it was within the proximity of the village, some of the wider challenges. Now, it's not for the district council to find those solutions. It is for that agent or that applicant through the call for sites and the work they're doing with officers to overcome some of our concerns. And we have concerns about every single site. No site across the district or the country is ever perfect, but it's not for us as the planning authority and the politicians or Gemma and her team to find those solutions. It's up to the applicant and the agent to find those solutions for us and present to us the ability for those sites to come forward. So across the piece, you'll see that sites, some parishes will have objected to and said this is completely wholly inappropriate. But when we take that in the bigger position of one village against the whole of Breckland, some 115 parish and town councils, some 500 square miles, 5 market towns, I've still got to try and find the requirement to deliver those 920 units a year through the local plan. Now, I didn't get elected to concrete over our communities, far from it. But I'm sort of arrived at this position of one, the government mandates that I've got to deliver a local plan, because if I don't, in consultation and in partnership with all of you, the government will impose a local plan upon us. And secondly, if we don't deliver a plan which is deliverable, the inspector will fail it, and therefore Breckland will cease to exist, and it will be a new local plan under the new authority covering whether that's a single Norfolk council or 2 or 3. So for those parishes who quite rightly raise concerns and objections, and they've still seen those sites come forward, I can only say thank you ever so much for engaging so positively. But please, as we are in this process, it would be really great for once again to raise those concerns and those objections through the formal Regulation 18 process where we are now, where we've evidenced all of those responses, but also if these do come forward, to find what does good look like, and whether that's around walking and cycling, improvements to your primary school or your primary care facilities, expansion of those open spaces, or even some more local policies around local homes or the different types of units you require within that, whether that's bungalows or 1-bedroom properties, whatever it is, please do offer those wider solutions. But yeah, I completely understand those frustrations across the district for those who push back. But the Regulation 18 is a formal consultation part of this process. And yeah, it is a real challenge to try and fit in 920 homes a year across our area without it being built in some parishes who probably didn't want to see it at all.
And that makes a lot of sense as an answer. We've had quite a few questions from one particular resident in Banham that they'd like answered. We'll start with this one because I think this is a really important question that a lot of people want to know the answer to. And that is how is the loss of valuable agricultural land, as we're obviously a rural district, how is that justified to meet government targets?
Yeah, and once again, we completely get that challenge, and part of our local government submission is actually we're really proud of our agri sector across the district and that wider supply chain. We've got those challenges we have to meet around delivering homes and delivering employment sites, and part of the most recent bit this time round is around sustainable energy, whether that's around solar and wind and the like. And that's a real challenge for us. And we look at previously agricultural land quality and that grading provision, but we've also got to make sure that we're delivering a viable plan. And that's back to that contentious piece of what's greenfield, what's grey, what's agri as we move forward. And that's a challenge all of us are facing through this process. And you'll see some of our sites which have come forward are larger sites, strategic in their size and scale. Those development areas will all be on agricultural land and a small part of possible existing industrial. That has to be a strategic decision for us to make sure that, one, that wasn't the district council imposing that on the landowner, that was those landowners coming forward because they think it was the right thing to do, or a site which is deliverable and achievable. And that's something we're absolutely grappling with, and that's why we're looking at the plan across the whole of Breckland, not just single communities, and making sure that we've got a good understanding of where that wider land usage position sits. There is talk within government around a review of the agricultural land position that's going through DEFRA at the moment, and the relevant select committee in that regard. We're not expecting a whole Greenbelt review as a wider example on land usage. that is still being laid down to local authorities to lead on that if required, rather than a single national piece of work. But for the residents in Banham, I hear that loud and clear. I'm really proud of our agricultural heritage and what we do for the food economy and food security, but it's back to that piece of grappling with that challenging housing number we've got to deliver.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think that's a question a lot of people will have on their minds. I can see that we've had another one come in very similar. Why are you considering grade 2 agricultural land for allocation of new homes? So it's a hot topic in a rural district like this. I think another question that's come from the same resident in Banham, but I think this applies to a lot of villages. There's concerns about the level of capacity in the local primary school. What's going to be done in terms of, I know the allocation in Banham is about 70 new homes. What's going to be done in terms of increasing capacity or potentially getting children to villages that have capacity in their primary schools? And also, why are we not focusing more allocations in those villages that we know already have capacity?
Yeah, so twofold. One, Norfolk County Council as the lead education authority is part of the statute consultee in all of the planning process, but particularly for where we are with a local plan site. So many large sites, as they're coming forward, are going to require primary education on those sites because of the number of units there. But for where there are an existing primary school, there'll be things such as Section 106 contributions from the developer. That will allow expansions on those existing sites so that they can go from strength to strength. But on the flip side, part of that challenge, and you're absolutely right, those primary schools, and for those of you who follow the Eastern Daily Press, there's been talks recently about the closure of some primary schools across Norfolk, and that will be reviewed again by the county council, is to make sure that all of our communities are sustainable and viable. And part of that is to create those new homes, those new families coming through and those new children, so that those primary schools can survive, the local pub can survive, the shop can survive. But I understand in your concern around those existing schools and those are at capacity. That's why Norfolk County Council is so important to this process early on, so that we can begin to understand if homes are coming forward into a current town or village and that local school is at capacity, that we're building in through the Section 106 the requirement for that to be expanded, but also as part of the allocations process to make sure Norfolk County Council understand if children are coming into the school, actually where they may need to move those around from a wider geography perspective as well. So there's some intelligent data and formula which the county does, but that absolutely is integral to where we are in the local plan setting process, because we want all of our primary schools in our villages and our towns to thrive, and we want to make sure that if they need to expand, they can expand, but that happens at a really organic and natural rate where everyone knows it's happening and taking place.
Good. Thanks for that answer, Sam. I've got a question that might be better pointed to Gemma now. What assurances are given by landowners that they'll comply with things in the plan? I'm guessing what the person that's asked that question means is sort of like, how do we ensure that affordable housing and things like that are going to be delivered on sites and they won't just sort of try to get out of it at a later date?
Okay, so we have methods that we go through to ensure viability. We have what's called a whole plan viability test. So the whole district has been via a viability specialist to say, yes, you can ask for example, 25% affordable housing to be delivered on major sites, and they've just done that as a blanket, looking at other obligations and obligations of costs and things that we require developers to contribute to justify the land and to make it sustainable and in keeping with the local plan. So this is what we ask for. When they submit sites through the call for sites, they have to say that, yes, we are viable. We're very well aware that's not a legal contract, that is a submission and a statement. So we then test them. We're then going to do a viability 2 through the local plan evidence base, which is available online. The viability 1 is currently up with all of the appendix and everything that goes with it, along with the other parts of the evidence base. So the viability 2 will test the larger sites just on a very high level test to say, yes, you are viable to deliver these obligations as required by the local plan to support the development. And that includes libraries, infrastructure, education, and affordable housing, open space, children's play. The list is in there to make sure that these are delivered. What I think people are then concerned about is a couple of years after an application has been approved, occasionally developers will then say, oh, my site's no longer viable. Can you reduce the obligations and can you make them less so that we are a viable site and we can deliver the housing that you need? This is an allowed system. We are allowed to look at them and we have a duty to assess them when they come in. What this local plan is proposing to put in and what we are looking to try and reduce this is saying the current version of the local plan says, say current meaning draft, if you look at this local plan to reduce your obligations within 5 years, we will not look at it. We're allowed to do that in national policy. We have 5 years. So if you come in after 5 years, we have to look at it. But if you come in under 5 years, we will simply refuse it. This is to try and get the obligations delivered as envisaged when the application was submitted and determined. We are also saying that if after the 5 years or if you come in with an unviable site and it's of a significant size, so a major site, we will look at having a clawback mechanism. This is okay if you're building 500 houses and you've said it's not viable. After the first 100, we'd like you to come back and show your viability and we will reassess. And then we can reassess at a later date. And this is all secured by a legal agreement. And this is trying to ensure that, so far as practical, developments that say they're going to deliver the obligations, the affordable housing, and all of the other infrastructure needs that we require will deliver them. And we are being robust in our assessment of those. And there's actually 4 policies combined which do make this a robust system to protect the infrastructure that we require to come in with large scale developments.
Excellent. It's a very detailed answer. I'm hoping that that can alleviate some of the concerns on that. Next question. There's some villages, I know the example that's been given here is North Lopham. They've had a few small-scale developments over recent years, but these aren't shown on the local plan map. I think you'll be best to answer this over Sam, because you look at the map every day. So why aren't those included when they've already been built out? Can you explain that for us?
Well, you are right. I do look at the map every day, without fail. So the ArcGIS map, which is the local plan map, is what we call the local plan map. There's another map on the Breckland website, which has all of the planning permissions and not planning permissions, all of the planning applications, whether they've been granted or not, and they're all on there. So you can see every application. If we put all of those onto our local plan map, the entire map would be coloured in. And it would become very confusing and everybody would have to flick layers on and off. And that is because that is a lot of applications that have been through, whether they've been approved or not. What we do is when we do the monitoring report, the AMR, I'm trying not to use abbreviations, I'm trying very hard, although the table is low, so you can't kick me. And we look at not just completions, but developments which have been granted planning permission. So they're called extant permissions, developments that can be built out. So when we look at the allocations for different villages, we take those into account, ones that have been built out within the plan period and ones that can be built out within the plan period, so the extant permissions. So while they're not shown on the map, they are taken into account when we're allocating sites and when we're going through the process of deciding where development is appropriate.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair enough. That makes complete sense. Hopefully that's answered that for the person that asked that. I will come to Sam for these next questions. There's a few that are kind of along the same lines. These were asked, pointed at a specific site, but I think they work quite well across pretty much all sites, because these are things that we have to consider in the round. How will things like surface water and flood risk be dealt with? And how will how will the loss of landscape be mitigated? What highway improvements will there be? And won't this disproportionately grow the village?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So all of our sites as we come forward will see either the creation of some areas as those sort of strategic development areas come forward, or expansions to our current market towns and villages and settlements. So back to sort of Gemma's response, anything such as that, whether it's around surface water, drainage, and alike, all picked up through that local lead flood authority sat with Norfolk County Council. They're a really important part of where we are today, and part of the challenge is to make sure that anything which comes forward doesn't exacerbate any of those existing challenges. And if it was to, that we have to mitigate it through that plan. And as Gemma said, that can be achieved through Section 106 contributions or early civils works on those sites to make sure that those new homes which come forward don't place any further strain and burden on those existing communities from an infrastructure purpose of those facilities. Now, some of you will say, well, Sam, that's all great, but I can't get an appointment at my local doctor's surgery, and there's no bus in my community. Now, some of those you require extra growth, so such as public transport. We need the homes to be built and the residents to live there. For Norfolk County councillors, the highway authorities to consider changes to the bus network and bus routes and the timetabling. But in relation to doctors and dentists as alike, the NHS, the local health authority, they're consulted on as part of this process, and they once again will understand through their formulas how many new homes are being proposed in a certain geography, what the impact of that will be on that local doctor's surgery. Now, through the planning process and the local plan, as Gemma said, we can make sure that developers deliver Section 106 contributions for expansions to doctor's surgeries. What the planning system can't do is create doctors or nurses or prescribing paramedics and alike. That has to come through the NHS and how they deliver that contract. But absolutely, if the NHS says there's a requirement to expand a local doctor's surgery by 1 or 2 consulting rooms, and we can achieve that through the number of homes and the developer contribution, we absolutely will deliver that through the engagement and that requirement with that developer. But we can't dictate and decide that from the planning perspective. That has to be the health who give us that understanding of what's required if those new homes come forward. And the same for roads. If Norfolk County Council or National Highways say that this number of units will require an improvement to the road network, or a junction upgrade, or a new roundabout, or a pedestrian crossing, or cycle pass, footpath, whatever it is, the developer will be required to deliver that to achieve the requirement to get planning permission. Because of course, if the statutory constitutes Norfolk County Council says they object, then that is a material reason when it gets to a full application in detail for us as the planning authority to refuse an application. So it's in the interest of those developers and agents, as we said earlier, through this process, to understand what those concerns and issues are. And that's why the Regulating 18 process is so important, to understand what some of those challenges are, and if houses did have to be built in that community, what would good look like to overcome those challenges. And that's why feedback through this process through towns and parishes, but also residents, businesses and visitors, is so important.
Thank you, Sam. I know particularly doctors is a very hot topic. I mean, it's difficult for everyone to get appointments already, so it's good to have an idea of how we can overcome the additional burden of additional people. And I think it's important to remember that the NHS, as an expert consultee, will be giving us those answers, hopefully, of how and where they want those things to be built, or where additional funding's needed. So yeah, thank you for that. I've got one for you now, Gemma. How do neighbourhood plans play into this? How are they going to be affected? Why are some sites that aren't in neighbourhood plans now in this plan? Will we have to change neighbourhood plans going forward to reflect this? Are you able to shed some light on that at all?
Yes, of course. So neighbourhood plans are really important. They are made by, for anyone who doesn't know, they're made by the parishes of which they relate to, and they are in accordance with the NPPF and the current local plan of the local authority, and they make a design for their parish, for their village, for their area, and they're really good because they have local knowledge and they have local wants and local needs put into it on a real localized level from the people who live there. So yes, they are incredibly important, and they're still important. There's some very proactive neighbourhood plans, for example, and I will name drop. Swanton Morley is a very good example that has allocated a site for housing.
Mhm.
As they have allocated a site for housing, that we don't necessarily need to. We had several sites put forward in that village, in that parish, and currently they've allocated enough housing. Now, as Sam said earlier, this is a draft local plan, but that is the current weight that we are taking from their neighbourhood plan, that they have allocated a site for housing, and that meets the quantum that we would be putting into Swanton Morley. So that is just an example of a parish that I happen to know very well. There are other parishes that have been equally as bold and proactive, and that shows the importance of them putting their desires and their wants forward. And if they allocate sites and they allocate their green space, these are things that are called material considerations, which we have to take into account when we are deciding planning applications that come before our development management colleagues. So they do fit in alongside the local plan. Of course, this local plan is currently in draft format, so you do get into the intricacies of which comes first, which is the most up-to-date and relevant local plan, and which one takes precedence and which one is most in line with the NPPF, and the NPPF is the highest one, which is the National Planning Policy Framework. There's me failing again not to use abbreviations. So that's the National Planning Policy Framework. So they all have to work together, but yes, they are really, really important. But that said, not having a neighbourhood plan doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. We still look at all of the parishes, all of the settlements, all of the villages to see how the quantum is going to be divided based on a hierarchy. So we do still do all of that. So whilst it's not a necessity, they are really good ways for local people to give their views, but we still look after the villagers, and we do have a design guide to seek to protect villagers' character when development comes forward, as well as the design policies in the current local plan and in the current draft local plan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gemma. And that was a good plug for Swanton Morley's neighbourhood plan. Other local neighbourhood plans are available. Another one for you, Gemma. Why is there such a financial imbalance between developers' professional planning consultants in support of applications compared with constituents who are affected by planning development, who maybe only have a short consultation period and aren't able to put forward such like strong objections as opposed to the backing of those developers and consultants are able to put forward?
Right, that is a really interesting question, and actually I think
it's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the first time we've had that one as well. So yes, you're right. People who put forward sites, and the bigger the site, usually the more money is behind it, because they are made for financial gain. So they get consultants in who can pull in other consultants. So they will have drainage consultants, they will have flood risk consultants, they will have highways consultants, landscape ecology. I mean, the list is huge, which would be drawn in to put forward a site for a local plan allocation if it was a large one. And hopefully people are reassured by that the discrepancy in finances is because they actually do have to demonstrate the site is developable and deliverable. But we still rely on local knowledge when it comes to objections. We still rely on local people giving us their opinions and their thoughts and their wants and desires for the if it gets built on, we would like this, or well, actually you can't build there. Did you not know that there's something exciting buried under there? Which makes us then go to our colleagues to ask, is there something exciting buried under there? And from an archaeological perspective, not anything weird. So they are well financed, and more well financed than most individuals, because most individuals aren't going to spend considerable amounts of money putting in an objection about a planning application. That's not to say that, not planning application, sorry, a local plan allocation. That's not to say that they don't. We do have professionals comment on allocations on behalf of private individuals, and we have professionals comment on allocations on behalf of other site allocation clients. So client has put in a site allocation here and somebody else has put in a site allocation here. The developer will say, oh, we don't like that one because we might not get ours. So they do argue against each other's as well, which also tries to even the playing field somewhat. But no, on the whole, that is where the discrepancy is, and that is why. It's because they have to prove in such a significant, even though it's high level, it is significant detail that they have to demonstrate that the site is deliverable and developable to be an allocation within the local plan, whereas individuals tend not to have the same sort of significant resources to put into an objection. But also to be rest assured, for individuals who don't have that resource, we look at the sites to assess them. So we have experts. We have our lead local flood authority. They are the experts looking at, have they proven that this site can drain adequately in accordance with their up-to-date guidance. So the experts are still looking over the sites. They're just looking over all of the sites. And the same with Natural England. We'll look at the protected species. And same as highways, look at the highways infrastructure and can the roads accept that sort of development, or do they need mitigation? So whilst individuals don't tend to pay for the consultants to look it over, the experts do still look everything over to double check the submissions of the experts.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. The next question is, do responses made to the previous consultation need to be made all over again? I can answer that. Yes, please. Quite simply, yes, we do need it again. Here is another one for Sam. When does that 920 a year start, and has it already started?
Yes, it has.
Excellent.
The figures here, yeah. So
yeah.
So what does it mean for us? For those of you involved with planning or any alike, you may refer to our term of our 5-year housing land supply, and that's where we can predict our ability to deliver the required housing numbers over a 5-year period. That increase in that housing number from what Breckland devised ourselves back in 2022 of 600 to where this government has given us that mandated figure has sadly blown our 5-year housing land supply out of the water. Now, what's the so what for that? The so what is we've really got to deliver our local plan now within that timescale Gemma alluded to earlier to give us some protection, because without a local plan, without a 5-year housing land supply, there is a real risk that we will see speculative growth across our district. What does that mean? It means that a developer can be frustrating to us as local councillors, as the planning authority, and you as communities and residents, that they can place an application nearly anywhere across the district and deal with some of those mitigations we've already spoke about. And if we are minded to, quite rightly, refuse it because we don't think it meets our emerging or previous plan or what we feel is right and appropriate, they'll take us to appeal, and 9 times out of 10, very sadly, that appeal will be overturned because we haven't achieved our 5-year housing land supply and don't have an adopted local plan. So the local plans, as I said earlier, as much as those detailed applications are so important around the design, the number of and types of units, actually the local plan in its widest sense is the most important document Breckland Council delivers from a place-based perspective. What does that mean, place-based? From a community Breckland perspective, because it gives us some clarity and certainty of where we want to be, and it proves the evidence base to any inspector that we are making good headway to adopt a sound local plan by that position of the latter part of the year. So as we move forward and get ready for that adoption the following year, that's why it's so important. So long-winded answer from a politician. Yes, the number's live. Yes, it's proven problematic. Yes, it's scuppered our 5-year housing land supply. Yes, it's caused us to have to commence our local plan process all over again. But the timetable is tight and we're working our best to try and achieve it in that time frame.
Thanks, Sam. You're right, that was a long-winded answer. I forgot what the question was by the end of it. Next question for you. We've had someone ask, how is this a fair and representative consultation when so many people still aren't aware of the plan and so many people have only heard of it through word of mouth?
Now, I'll take some of that on the chin, but actually we've been really concerted in our effort. We are one of the few councils across Norfolk who still has a hard copy magazine that goes to every address across the district through Royal Mail. And in that, hopefully all of you get to read it. It states clearly throughout the whole of this process what we've been doing through our local plan, how to engage. Beyond that, we're doing sessions such as this. We're not just speaking to our town and parish councils and our district councillors. We're going out across the district to have sessions either in person or online such as this to try and lift that profile. Beyond that, for those of you who follow us on social media, we're constantly dripping in through that advertisement, the local plan and where we are, and to try and engage. Now, I know I'm never going to get 100% of the district to respond to this consultation, but I don't want to be where we've been previous in that low single figures of respondents. Because as I said at the start in those opening remarks, Nick, I want everybody across the district to shape this plan because it is in reality our plan. And we have a good understanding where we think some of these houses are going to go through this position of the Reg 18, but all of your responses will help shape that. So my ask to all of those people online tonight and who watch this subsequently is go tell another 10 people about the local plan, whether that's at work, your friends, the local coffee shop, through your family, WhatsApp, whatever it is, and get them to come and engage in this process. Some of the questions through it will be dull as dishwater and you won't want to respond. You may not even understand what it means, but some of them actually are so important around your local community, homes for your friends, your family, your children, your grandchildren, making sure we've got the right sort of connectivity and transport and employment, open spaces. There is something in the local plan for everybody. So yeah, I know I'm not going to reach everyone, but we are trying our damnedest to reach as many people as possible.
Thank you, Sam. The next question is quite a good one, actually. Given the earlier answer regarding removal of settlement boundaries and organic growth, how do you reconcile the scale of Rowdham and Larling dwarfing the two existing villages?
And we hear that loud and clear, and that is a big challenge and something we are having to grapple with. I think that the opportunity, if that strategic development area does come forward, is that really strong master planning, which will be required to bring those sites together with a single vision of place. And that's working with those existing communities who will be directly impacted, but also those in that hinterland and on the peripherals to make sure that they're helping shape what that looks like. And for us in Breckland, this is new territory for us. We haven't looked at this before. We've always looked at urban extensions where we're bolting thousands of houses onto existing communities, and particularly we'll look at the likes of Thetford and Attleborough, some 5,000 and 4,500 houses being bolted on those communities. But where we are with the likes of the Rowdham and Larling community, through that master plan, actually, we want to ensure that we're protecting that local heritage, that local vernacular and that design of those communities which are existing, and ensuring that the new communities don't adversely impact that. And actually, we're trying to take what exists now as part of that palette through the design guide and the design work as it gets forward to the detail application itself. But more importantly, the master plan will shape that. So as we look across the district in the realm, and we said earlier, we weren't looking at this site for this type of number of units prior to this increase in the housing figure. This new increase to the housing figure has really proved a challenge for all of us to achieve the required number and to move through the local plan at the required stages. But we want to work with all of those residents and businesses in that locality to make sure we get the best type of outcome if this site is a site which does come forward and is adopted through the local plan.
Thank you, Sam. I've got a question for Gemma relating to a specific site in Ling. Most residents use underground water from chalk streams and are not connected to main water supplies. These could be affected by higher bacterial levels and affect the drinking water. Are houses going to be linked to a sewage system that does not affect the water or soil quality?
Right, that is a very specific question. And whilst I am not completely au fait with the plumbing systems of Ling, I do know that we consult with the Environment Agency about water disposal. So they look at underground aquifers. Sorry, I'm trying to put this in a way. So underground water sources. Our Environment Agency has them all on maps. We also have them all on maps. And they look at, could they be affected by any form of development through any form of pollution, and they comment. And the comments are based on the type of development and the proximity to the aquifer and the level of aquifer, for example. So if you are fed by an aquifer, you will have those consultation responses from the Environment Agency to protect your water. In addition to that, Anglian Water are a consultee as part of the local plan process, and we have informal conversations with them about how houses are going to be connected and the capacity and existing sewerage providers and water recycling centres to make sure that development should be coming online in line with the capacity and the overhead that they have. That's probably a very technical answer. Sorry.
It sounded good to me. I'm hoping that's the answer the person was looking for. For sites that are not in the local plan, I'll ask this one to you, Gemma. For smaller sites that aren't allocated, will those be allowed? How does that work for sites that aren't in the plan?
So the local plan looks at mainly larger sites, to be honest. So any that fall under our thresholds would have been automatically not taken forward as part of the local plan process. Doesn't mean that your site isn't okay for development. It also doesn't mean that your site is okay for development. But we have allowed within this draft of the local plan what's called a number for windfall development, and windfall development is development for sites which aren't part of the local plan allocations. So primarily the small sites, there will be some larger sites coming forward as well, but it's mainly meant so that smaller sites can come forward outside of the site selection allocations and the local plan for development. What happens then is they can submit a pre-application advice request. We do charge for that service, but it is a very good service, and they can find out whether their site is likely to go forward or not should an application be submitted. If the answer is yes, or if it's no, it's up to them. They can submit a planning application and have the site, what we say, assessed on merit. So if you look at back to the removal of the settlement boundaries, if you look at our policy Gen 03, which defines built form, and then you'll read that in conjunction with the other policies, you can say, oh, this, or more than likely get an agent to say, oh, this one sits adjacent to the current built form, this is how it's going to work, and this is how this policy would apply. That would only be after this draft local plan became adopted. If they came in ahead of that, they would be assessed under the current local plan, so the 2019 revised in 2023 local plan. So no, it doesn't mean that they aren't okay for development, but it also doesn't mean that they are just because they're small. They will be assessed on merit against the current local planning policy that is adopted at the time.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the answer. I've got some questions for Sam. There's you should be aware there's an allocation in Litcham for 100 houses. I know a lot of people in the village are really interested in this site. They're interested to know how such a big increase in the population of the village is going to affect sort of the roads in the village and the existing tight-knit community. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So I'm aware of some of the concerns of those residents, and regardless whether it's one house or 10 or 50, I know that all of our communities across Breckland will embrace those new residents who on many occasions will be our friends, our family, and our children, our grandchildren who are moving across areas across the district. In relation to the road network and those challenges, it's back to those previous comments. Norfolk County Council as a statutory consultee through the Reg 18, and then when we get to those detailed applications, are so important for us we're not the lead flood authority, we're not the we're not the roads or highways authority. We do rely on those subject matter experts to help us as planning officers and the planning authority to understand what's achievable and what's not achievable. And if it's not achievable, can certain mitigations or changes be introduced to mitigate against that? So for that application, if there are concerns around the road network or walking and cycling, wherever it may be, the Highways Authority will have to work with the applicant, or sorry, the applicant will have to work with the Highways Authority to overcome that, to give confidence to the Highways Authority that they are comfortable to agree to that application. And they may, on many occasions, you'll see applications come forward in which the Highways Authority refuse an application and aren't willing to give their support, and that's absolutely right and proper. And it comes back to the important part of this process to make sure we understand where those sites are. I think for any applications, particularly in all of our villages across Breckland are really vibrant, beautiful local communities. And that's where the design guide, that Breckland document we've got, is really important to make sure that we're using that local vernacular, that local design, and trying to incorporate that into the those new homes as they come forward. And regardless of, as I said, whether that's 1, 5 or 10 or 20, that actually we're using that design guide. What we don't want, and my planning colleagues have built, I don't want little boxes being built in our villages and our towns. I want really nice, attractive homes where actually over the years, when they begin to settle and they begin to get some fair wear and tear, actually you couldn't tell how long they've been there for, and they really improve the community. But also the third part is actually we're giving life and to our communities. We're making sure that those villages which have a pub or have a shop or have a butchers or bakers or some local small businesses and or a school has the right type of growth organically over time to ensure that those really important community facilities can survive in what at the moment today are some pretty turbulent markets. So yeah, I hear loud and clear, and that's why the Regulation 18 process is so important to feed in your concerns and comments, so that Gemma and Nick and the team can make sure they're working with our county colleagues at the Highways Authority to really understand the concerns and how, if they are going to have homes come forward, how we can mitigate against them.
Thank you for that, Sam. I've got one for Gemma now. Apologies, it's just completely left my mind. How do we deal with the cumulative impact of development?
The cumulative impact.
Yes.
So when I said earlier with regards, I think was it North Lotton the question about, was how do we assess previous planning applications? So it was to do with the map, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So the annual monitoring report does look at extant permissions and current developments as they're being built out. So we look at the cumulative impact of development towards the allocations going through the development strategy. When we look at the large scale developments and the cumulative impact on things like the roads, the schools, that's through our consultations with our colleagues at Norfolk County Council, at National Highways, with Natural England, and we look at the cumulative development of the whole of the development being put forward within the district. Now, I know that that's a really large number when you're looking at 920 homes per year for the life of the plan, and these will then be built out beyond, some of them, on the strategic level. So what we do is we actually look at it as a wholesale. So when we speak to, for example, Anglian Water, we don't just say, what do you think about this site here? We say, what do you think about this distribution of housing on a cumulative basis, on the impact on your products, on your resources? And same with National Highways. You know, we have two trunk roads, the A47 and the A11. How will this level of growth impact those roads in their current state? What improvements would be required to make the roads capable of taking them, whilst looking at road speeds, commuter times, and actual just capacity as well? So that's how we look at it in conjunction with our consultees to make sure that we really do take a whole holistic approach, and that the impact is looked at right from this early stage, pre-allocation. So we're looking at it before these sites actually are taken forward, before there's a spade in the ground. Everybody is aware of it, and we're going through it that way. Perfect.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one more question tonight, but as I said at the beginning, we will endeavour to make sure all of the questions that have been submitted are answered in the next couple of days. So apologies if we haven't been able to answer your question, but we will get an answer to you as soon as possible. So the last question is for Sam. Where are all these people coming from?
Yeah, so back to my comments earlier. These are individuals, one who are our friends and family who exist in Breckland already, or are having children and grandchildren. If we look at the type of numbers which our high schools are kicking out every year, we're in the sort of low thousands of young people leaving our high schools across Breckland every single year. If all of those alone wanted their own house, we'd be looking at about 1,400 homes plus a year. But of course, many people have more than their children. But regardless of that, others want to come and live and work in our fantastic district. And that's something we should be really proud of, that actually, like many of us, not all of us were born in Breckland. I wasn't. I was born in Kings Lynn, but I moved to Breckland, and that's where I've been for most of my working life. But that was a conscious choice of my family to come and move to Breckland. The population is increasing across the country, and the same for birth rates. That's why this government, I believe, has delivered a mandated housing target to ensure that they have an understanding that everybody has a home as we move forward. The challenge for us is to make sure we're delivering a sound local plan, but more importantly is to make sure that all of you across Breckland are helping us shape that local plan to get the right type of homes in the right places, the right employment and the right type of infrastructure to go with it, so that Breckland continues to be a really beautiful district, whether that's in a village or a market town.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Sam. So, as I said, we've run out of time for questions this evening. If you can think of any more that you have and you haven't submitted them already, please do email them in to localplan@breckland.gov.uk, and one of the team will get back to you as soon as possible. Similarly, we're going to post the answers to all of the questions that have been submitted tonight on our website in the coming days. So be sure to look out for those. And yeah, if you do have any comments to make on the plan, please do comment either by email to that same email address or on our online consultation system, which is at breckland.govocal.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. As Sam said at the start, it's really important that you do comment. You will be listened to. Obviously, not everyone will get what they want out of it, but we will take into account all of the comments and try to formulate policies accordingly. So yeah, thank you very much, Gemma, for being here, and thank you, Sam, for being here online as well, and thank you to everyone else for coming.
Lovely. Thanks all. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.